I was setting out the last of the plates when Marcus suddenly struck his fork against the table hard enough to rattle the glasses. The twins jumped, but he didn't even glance at them. His eyes were on me. I'm going to live my life. You take care of my kids. That's the rule, he said, as if he were announcing the weather. Tessa didn't look up from her bowl. She just kept eating, shoulders relaxed, like she'd heard this speech before and fully agreed with it. The room felt smaller, tighter, as if the walls were waiting for me to nod and accept everything he'd just thrown at me. I didn't sit back down. I couldn't. My legs moved before my mind did, and I heard my own voice, calm. Far too calm, saying, "Then you can start living without my support." Marcus snorted. "Mom, don't be dramatic. We're just talking." But we weren't just talking. We hadn't been for a long time. 3 months of early mornings, late nights, unpaid work, unspoken obligations. 3 months of disappearing into the background of their lives, pressed together into one small, sharp moment that finally hurt enough to make me move. The twins went back to their food. They were used to adults speaking in tones they didn't understand. But Brielle, she looked at me. Really looked. Her face didn't show surprise. Only something like relief mixed with fear, as if she knew this scene had been creeping toward us for weeks. My keys felt cold in my hand when I picked them up from the counter. Marcus leaned back in his chair, eyebrows raised. "You're leaving over this. Not are you okay? Not let's talk." Just disbelief that I wasn't staying in the position he'd quietly assigned me. I didn't answer him. I didn't trust my voice not to break. The evening air hit me the moment I stepped outside, carrying the faint sounds of traffic children playing down the street, and a freedom I hadn't felt since before I moved in here. I walked to my car without looking back, knowing if I turned around even once, I might lose my resolve. And as I closed the door behind me, the first threads of truth began pulling loose, leading me back to where it all started just 3 months earlier. 3 months before I walked out of that house, Marcus had called me late in the evening. His voice sounded frayed, like he hadn't slept in days. "Mom, we're drowning. The kids need structure. Tessa's burnt out. Please help us for a while." I remember sitting in my small rental home in rural North Carolina, staring at the chipped paint on the wall as I listened. He sounded desperate, and I let that desperation pull me in. I told myself I was stepping in out of love, that it was temporary, that they needed me. I didn't see how easily love could turn into obligation. The first week passed gently enough. I cooked breakfasts, packed lunches, folded laundry into careful stacks. I vacuumed hallways and wiped fingerprints off glass. Tessa offered one soft thank you before slipping upstairs for what she called work calls. Marcus came home late smelling of hotel soap and claiming he had meetings that ran long. By the second week, my mornings started before sunrise. I moved quietly through the kitchen so I wouldn't wake anyone, though maybe that didn't matter. They were used to me doing everything before they even opened their eyes. At night, after the last dish was put away and every toy was back in its bin, I stayed awake just to have a moment to myself. Somewhere along the way, help hardened into identity. No one asked if I slept well. No one asked if I needed anything. My presence had become background noise, useful, reliable, invisible. Still, little things unsettled me. Suitcases parked by the front door, never fully emptied. Tessa's dresses laid out as if she were heading somewhere warm, not to a conference room. Marcus disappearing for entire weekends, returning with vague explanations that didn't match the exhaustion he claimed to feel. But I smoothed over the discomfort, insisting to myself that families went through messy seasons. I just didn't know that this season had structure rules I hadn't agreed to, expectations I hadn't seen forming. One night, I heard Tessa on the phone laughing. She'll handle everything. She always does. I kept stirring the soup like I hadn't heard a thing, trying to believe it didn't mean what it sounded like. I shouldn't have. One afternoon, I was wiping crumbs off the counter while Tessa hurried upstairs to change clothes for yet another meeting. She left her phone beside the fruit bowl, buzzing with a new alert. I didn't mean to look, but the screen lit up bright and impossible to ignore a photo from one of her friends with the caption, "You look amazing." My eyes drifted toward it before I could pull them away. There she was, Tessa in a sleeveless dress, standing near a wide stretch of coastline sun, lighting up her hair, a bright drink in her hand. It was carefree, effortless glowing. And definitely not Michigan. Definitely not a conference center. The timestamp hit me next. Same dates she told Marcus she'd been stuck in workshops all day. A sharp ache opened in my chest, the kind that doesn't announce itself with pain, but with clarity. I should have turned the phone face down and walked away, but my hand moved on its own, swiping to the next image. There were more. Tessa laughing with friends, Tessa lounging by the water, Tessa holding a shopping bag from a store I knew wasn't anywhere in the Midwest. Every photo contradicted the story she'd fed us. Every smile told a truth they thought I'd never see. That night, Marcus came home talking about how exhausting their business travel had been. He rubbed his neck like he'd spent hours in meetings. Tessa slid her sunglasses onto the table without a thought, the same ones from the beach photos. I felt the sting rise up again, but I pushed it down. The twins were hungry. Homework needed checking. Laundry had piled up. There was always something waiting for me, always a reason to stay busy enough to ignore what hurt. But Brielle noticed. She always noticed. While rinsing her plate, she leaned close and said softly, "Grandma?" They wouldn't be honest, even if you asked. I managed a small smile, though it felt thin and brittle. I wasn't ready to believe her yet, not fully. But her words lodged somewhere deep, where denial was beginning to crack. And it was that crack that would lead me to the truth waiting in the next room. It happened on a Tuesday so ordinary, I barely remember the morning. I was in the study, folding clean sheets and placing them on the shelf where they usually went. Marcus had left the tablet on the desk, open and glowing. I reached over to shut it, thinking nothing of it, just another device left in my way. But then I saw the title of the document on the screen, Budget with Mom. My hand froze above the power button. Something in me knew I shouldn't open it, but something deeper, older, told me I had to. So I tapped it. The list appeared instantly, cold, orderly. Written with the kind of clarity people use when they're planning purchases, not lives. Use Mom for childcare. Redirect her monthly checks to joint expenses. Keep her in the storage room until we reorganize. Encourage her to stay long-term. Consider paperwork for financial authority for emergencies. And then the line that made my throat close. Once debt is clear, revisit assisted living options. It felt like the room tilted. All the odd moments, the suitcases, the trips, the silence, the way they'd stopped thanking me, snapped together into one sharp picture. I had walked into their house thinking I was supporting my family. But they didn't see support. They saw strategy. I stepped back from the desk, breath catching, and almost stumbled into Brielle standing in the doorway. Her eyes were wide, the kind of wide that carries guilt, even when the person didn't do anything wrong. "I didn't want you to see that," she whispered. "But I'm glad you did." I sank into the chair, my hands trembling as they rested in my lap. "How long?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted the answer. "A while," she said softly. "And they think you won't fight back because, well, you never do." The truth of it settled in my chest heavier than any betrayal written on that screen. Because she was right. I had never fought back. Not once. But something in me shifted as I looked at that list, something that would follow me into the next steps I had to take. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long moment after Brielle left the study. My hands were still trembling, But something inside me had gone startlingly still. I had spent my whole life stepping back, softening, smoothing things over. But not this time. I reached for my phone before I could talk myself out of it. Halden Pierce answered on the third ring. I hadn't spoken to him in years, but his voice hadn't changed. I told him everything about the document, the list, the way the last few months had unfolded, with a clarity I wished I'd had sooner. He didn't hesitate. "What you're describing is exploitation," he said. "You need to gather evidence quietly. Don't confront them. Not yet." His certainty steadied me in a way I didn't expect. When the call ended, I felt a new kind of focus settle into my bones. I needed proof. Real proof. Brielle helped me check my bank activity on my old laptop. The numbers felt like Blow's withdrawals. I never made charges for stores I'd never set foot in, transactions that belonged to a life far more glamorous than mine. Later, while gathering laundry from Marcus's office, I found the receipts, thin slips of paper that exposed everything. Boutique purchases, weekend getaways, restaurant bills that could have covered groceries for a month. I photographed every page. With each click, another layer of the story I'd been told peeled away. I wasn't imagining things. I wasn't being sensitive. They were using me, plain and simple. Meanwhile, life in the house continued like nothing was wrong. Breakfast at dawn, school drop-offs, errands, cooking, cleaning. I moved through each task with a weight I couldn't shake, as if the truth I carried had its own gravity. Brielle hovered close, stepping in to help before I even asked. She watched me with an alertness far beyond her age, like she was afraid I might crumble if she looked away too long. One night, while I wiped down the counters, she spoke without lifting her eyes. "Grandma, when you leave, please take me with you." I paused, a damp cloth in my hand. I didn't answer. Not yet. I needed to be certain I could keep us both safe before taking the next step. The moment that pushed everything over the edge didn't come with shouting. It came quietly slipping into the room like something ordinary. I was drying the last plate after dinner when Marcus stepped into the kitchen, blocking the way out. "Mom, we should finalize that financial form I mentioned," he said. "It'll make things easier. Just sign where I tell you." He said it lightly, almost casually, as if he were asking me to pass him a grocery list. But over his shoulder, I saw Brielle standing near the doorway. Her expression, fear mixed with a rising anger, told me she understood far more than he realized. I set the plate down, carefully, wiped my hands on a towel so he wouldn't see them shaking, and asked, "What's the rush?" "It's for emergencies," he said. "It gives me control if something happens to you." The word control echoed louder than the rest. This wasn't about emergencies. This was about ownership of my money, my choices, my future. For the first time in years, I didn't fold. I didn't soften. "I'll think about it," I said. His eyebrows pulled together, a flicker of irritation crossing his face. He wasn't used to resistance from me. Not even a small one. He left the kitchen with a short nod, as if he could still steer the outcome. But as soon as he disappeared up the stairs, Brielle let out a shaky breath, like she'd been holding it the whole time. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed, the house quiet, except for the hum of the air vent. I took out my phone and typed 2 words to Halden Pierce. "It's time." He called within minutes. We discussed where to go, how to move, what to take. The plan was simple: leave when Marcus and Tessa weren't home. No confrontation, no scene. Just distance, clean and quiet. The next day, I packed small essentials, tucking them behind old sweaters in my closet. My heart pounded with each item I folded, but it wasn't fear anymore. It was the feeling of a door starting to open, leading me toward the moment I would finally walk out. Marcus and Tessa left just after sunrise that Friday, rolling their matching suitcases down the walkway. Their clothes didn't match the story they'd told: linen shirts, sandals, sunglasses perched on their heads. They looked like people heading to a resort, not an industry conference. I watched through the kitchen window until their car disappeared around the corner. The moment the street fell quiet, I went straight to my room. My hands didn't hesitate this time. I pulled the 2 small suitcases from the back of the closet, already half-packed from the night before, and set them on the bed. Brielle appeared in the doorway a few seconds later, her backpack already slung over her shoulder. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. We both knew the timeline. We moved quickly, almost silently. Toothbrushes, medications, documents, a few changes of clothes. Only what we truly needed. Everything else, the memories, the expectations, the hurt we left behind without a second thought. Before we walked out, I set a folded note on the kitchen table. I'm stepping away from this home. Do not contact me. All communication will go through my attorney. No anger, no explanations. Just the boundary I should have drawn months ago. We slipped out the back door and crossed the yard to my old sedan, the same car Marcus once told me to sell, because I wouldn't need it anymore. The keys felt heavy in my hand as I slid into the driver's seat. When the engine started, something tightened in my throat. Not guilt, not fear, just the strange sensation of finally releasing a life I'd been gripping long after it started hurting me. A text came in from Halden with the address, a small rental house on the edge of town. Vacant, quiet, safe. The drive took less than 20 minutes, but it felt like crossing a border I could never return through. The house smelled faintly of dust and old paint. It wasn't much, bare floors, empty rooms, but it didn't ask anything of me. That alone made it feel like a blessing. Brielle walked slowly through each room, breathing deeper than I'd seen her breathe in months. "Can we stay?" she asked. "We can start here," I told her, setting my hand on the doorframe as the next storm began to gather behind us. The first call came less than an hour after we set our bags down in the rental house. I didn't have to look at the screen to know who it was. Marcus's name lit up, then disappeared. A minute later, it rang again. Then Tessa. Then both of them in rapid succession, as if taking turns would wear me down. I let every call go unanswered. Halden had been clear: no contact, no explanations, no cracks they could slip through. He filed the protection requests before we'd even finished unpacking and told me the financial investigation paperwork would follow. I clung to his instructions like a railing on uneven ground. But the voicemails still came. Marcus's voice shifted with each message. Anger, disbelief, then something close to begging. "Mom, you're blowing things out of proportion. Mom, please come back. The kids need you. Mom, you're ruining us." The words didn't surprise me. What surprised me was how little space they took up inside me now. It was Brielle who felt the impact hardest. Her phone buzzed nonstop. She tried to ignore it until one message finally broke her composure. She handed me the screen with trembling fingers. "You're choosing her over your family. You're manipulated. You'll regret this." She sank onto the couch, shoulders shaking. I wrapped my arms around her and held her tight. "You are not responsible for their choices," I whispered. "You didn't cause this." For a long time, we stayed like that, two people carrying the weight of a family that had expected us to bend without breaking. Days passed, and we slowly built a rhythm inside the quiet house. Simple breakfast. Homework done at the small kitchen table. Evenings spent without accusations or demands. The silence felt unfamiliar, but it wasn't empty. It was gentle, patient, a space we were learning to fill on our own terms. Still in quieter moments, the truth I'd uncovered pressed down on me with its full weight. I had spent years believing love meant giving without limit. Now I saw how easily that belief had been twisted into permission to take. But each morning, as light filtered through the thin curtains, I felt a little steadier, ready to face the next step we both needed to take. Within a few weeks, I found a small job at a florist shop, a short drive from the rental house. It wasn't much, 3 days a week, a few hours at a time, but it felt like something solid to hold on to. The owner, a woman named Dahlia, with gentle eyes and a steady voice, didn't pry into my life the way others might have. She simply looked at me over the counter on my first day and said, "You look like someone who knows how to care for things." I did know. I'd spent years caring for people who rarely cared back. But caring for plants was different. They didn't take advantage. They didn't hide intentions behind polite smiles. They responded honestly to whatever you gave them light water time. I swept floors, trimmed stems, arranged small bouquets. The shop smelled faintly of soil and greenery, and the quiet rhythm of it steadied my breathing. There was something unexpectedly healing in restoring life one small stem at a time. Brielle adjusted to her new school just as quickly. Her grades started climbing slowly at first, then with a sudden confidence that surprised even her. She walked taller. She laughed more. She stopped apologizing every time she reached for something or took up space in a room. Watching her blossom felt like watching a younger version of myself finally get the safety I never had. Halden checked in often. He brought updates with a careful tone, never pushing, never assuming. There would likely be restitution, maybe even a settlement. The financial investigation was underway, and the findings weren't in Marcus's favor. I didn't want my son jailed. I didn't want revenge. I just wanted the pieces of my life back, my autonomy, my dignity, my peace. I wanted this chapter to close quietly, not with the same harshness that had forced me to leave. One afternoon, while watering the outdoor plants with Dahlia, I felt something uncoil inside me. A looseness, a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. For years, I had been shaped by what others needed. Now I was learning who I was when no one required anything from me. And that realization carried me toward the life waiting just beyond the final move we still had to make. 3 months later, Brielle and I carried the last of our boxes up the stairs to a modest 2-bedroom apartment not far from the florist shop. It wasn't fancy, but it was ours. The balcony faced the east, and on our first morning there, the sunlight spilled over the railing like it had been waiting just for us. I placed 3 pots of mint along the edge, fresh, bright, alive, because I wanted something that would grow as steadily as we were learning to. Brielle settled in quickly. She joined an art club at school and came home talking about colors and canvases instead of tension and silence. Her smile returned, not the careful, cautious one she used to wear, but something lighter, unburdened. One afternoon, she showed me a painting she'd finished, an older woman stepping out of a shadowed doorway into sunlight. "This one's you," she said. For a moment, I couldn't speak. Something inside me settled into place, a steady warmth I hadn't felt in years. I was no longer surviving someone else's rhythm. I was building my own. Weeks passed quietly. Work at the florist became something I looked forward to. Dahlia trusted me to open the shop handle arrangements, even greet the regular customers by name. My hands smelled faintly of mint and soil most evenings, and it comforted me. Marcus sent one last message sometime in late spring. "If you ever want to talk, I'm here." I read it once, then set the phone face down on the counter. I didn't respond. I didn't feel anger, only a soft certainty that some chapters close without words, without confrontation. Just the quiet weight of choosing a life that doesn't hurt to carry. One early morning, I stepped onto the balcony with a cup of coffee. The mint leaves shifted gently in the breeze, bright against the light. For the first time in a long while, my life didn't feel borrowed or diminished or shaped by someone else's demands. It was mine. Fully mine, and as I stood there watching the sunrise stretch across the sky, I felt ready to take the next step toward whatever waited beyond this new beginning.